What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Homie Hangout, where we help others move in excellence. And I get asked some variation of this question all the time, right? What would happen if you went back to prison? I get told that I'm a dropout and I'm no good and all this other stuff. And so this isn't really to answer the trolls, but there's a lot of people genuinely curious, right? Of kind of how things stand. And there's people in the lifestyle that are curious, and there's also a lot of people who haven't been in the lifestyle and are curious. And there's a lot of assumptions. So to kind of put all that to rest, again, the trolling is going to be what it is, and that's fine, right? All engagement is good engagement to some degree on social media. But for those that are really curious or want to know my view on things, here you go, right? And I've talked about this on lives and that kind of stuff before, but I've never actually done a video about this topic, and I've been on YouTube for a couple of years, so figure it's about time. Why not? Uh, if I was to go back to the California Department of Corrections tomorrow, they'd make a move on me, right? I'd get whacked for sure. Um, and would that have happened if not for YouTube? Maybe. Not entirely sure, but maybe. Um, I've been home almost 20 years, right? And throughout that time, I haven't been out in the streets living like a Norteno in the mix, right? Because I haven't been one. So I haven't been sending money back. I've been doing my own thing, living my own life as a civilian in essence for decades. Um, After being in prison and being schooled and having responsibility in there, right? So was I obligated to come home and get involved in stuff? No. The fact that I stayed out 20 years almost and then went back, would some people feel some type of way, and could there be a consequence? Sure, right? And whether they make a move or clean up or what, who knows, right? The politics are what they are, and prison is a vastly different place now than it was when I was in there. So we'll never know for sure. But it also doesn't really matter because being on YouTube has sealed the deal for sure, right? And so why, right? What about YouTube? Is it the whole Northerners can't get on camera thing? No, because like I said, I don't live that way. And I don't lose sleep over what would happen to me if I went to prison because I don't live my life in such a way that I have a really high likelihood of going back. But let's get into it. From jump, uh, when I kind of surveyed the landscape of YouTube channels, when I first even found out about this genre, which was, the time of the virus, right? I looked around and everybody who had a history of being a northerner or northern or whatever their status was, all those folks with channels were already deemed, right? They had snitched. Basically, they are all ratted if my memory serves me right. So, um, or at least most. Let me just put it that way, most, right? In case not all. So and that's not my story, right? Not saying I'm better than them, worse than them, whatever. It's just not my story. So so some people have asked, why'd you even get involved? You've been home all this time and whatnot. You never know, something could happen. You can catch a case. Like, why even do that? And I asked myself the same question before I started my channel, right? And really, what it comes down to is where I was at in my life at the time, right? And I don't have any regrets in terms of that. But I was just coming out of a rough season, roughest season I'd had since I've been home. Where I was acting out of character and all sorts of stuff. The virus had hit. I was living in the Sacramento area, which isn't where I'm, originally from. So I didn't really know a lot of people there. I had been going to UC Berkeley, but I left school, right? So that community wasn't really there so much anymore. And I was just coming out of this midlife crisis stage, right, where I was doing all kinds of shit I had no business doing, and kind of getting my mind right again. And so the idea of community, right? In all the years that I did community work, I minded my P's and Q's. And in part because that was just a responsible thing to do, but also because I was accountable. And what I don't want to be is a hypocrite. I'm not perfect, I make mistakes, but I don't set out to be a hypocrite. And so that community, that responsibility, helped keep me in check during times where it was tempting. And I wanted to get back to that place, right? And so I've seen this as an opportunity to do it virtually, right? At a time when people weren't getting together in prison. Um, I was kind of stuck in an area. And so I thought, man, why not? Right. And YouTube was popping, but also gave me a chance, or at least I had an idea of coming on here and talking about and doing some of the stuff that I had done before, right? Anger management classes and all this different stuff that I had acquired and skills I had acquired and experiences throughout all my years outside of prison. On top of sharing some of my experiences in prison and that kind of stuff, because I felt I had a different angle, so that's why. And again, uh, I don't live my life based on what particular people in prison might think of me, or based on my standing with individuals in prison. Uh, do I care what people think of me? Of course, everybody does, whether you admit it or not. Does that impact my choices? Very rarely. Like only for those really close to me. If my kids think some type of way about me, that that isn't what I want, then I'll really reevaluate, what I'm doing. But otherwise, it's I care, but there ain't a whole lot I could do about it besides be me. So that's part of it. Now, the people I associated with, because that's a big part, right? I came on YouTube and I associated with informants, right? People that have testified in multiple cases, people that work with law enforcement, right? So why? And man, that's a good question too, right? So I said back then, and I stand on that same rationale now, even though if I had to do it over again, would I have done it the same way? Probably not, probably not. But I I viewed it like this. I'm not in prison. I'm not pushing a line. I'm not pushing politics. I'm not trying to be active. Even though a lot of people that were no good a long, long time ago now try to use that as a way to like come after. Oh, Rascal thinks he's active. Rascal doesn't think he's active. Actually, I got a pretty clear understanding of who I am and where I stand, right? And I don't hide from it, and I don't make up stories, and I don't run from it, and I don't downplay it or anything else. So it's not that I thought I was active. Um, it's I didn't parole in the same standing as other individuals, but because I didn't make the same choices. But that doesn't again matter in the grand scheme of things of society and life, right? So the way I viewed it was, man, I'm not in prison. I'm not pushing that line. We're out here. We're civilians. It's not like I'm kicking it at these dudes' houses. To the best of my knowledge, before YouTube, right before just prior to YouTube, at least, I had never associated with anybody knowingly that that had told, right, and so it was kind of a thing for me when I first realized, and I was like, okay, what am I gonna do here? And I'm like, man, I'm past all that. I'm past that lifestyle. I'm a civilian. I'm not committing any crimes, and if I was, I certainly hell wouldn't be with these people, right? I'm not involved with what they have going on. I've never told on anybody, but everybody's story is their own, right? I would like to believe that there is no situation in which I would feel like that is my best option. So far in my life, there has not been. But I guess one never really knows until that time comes. But but it's just that's not my story. That's not my journey. You know, that's their journey. That's their story. So that's for them to answer to, right? What I'm trying to do on here is share good information, help people out, share some stories, that kind of stuff. So I made an exception. I made an exception because of the circumstances, and I thought, we kind of had the same goal, the same agenda here, and so let's prioritize that. You know, and did I get burned in the process sometimes? Yeah, for sure, right? And then I'll sit back and think like, damn, how this get this way? And then, well, fuck, the snake's gonna do snake shit, right? So like, you can't be surprised. So I don't have anybody to blame for that, but myself. And I'm not taking particular sides or naming names or anything else. It's just uh, I'm just answering questions that I get all the time, right? So and I'm keeping it real. Um, so so yeah, but that definitely had some people looking sideways, and I got reached out privately by folks and whatnot. Like, damn fool, like you fucking with these dudes. And I was like, yeah, but if I'm not gonna live by the rules, I'm not gonna live by the rules. And in reality, though, the whole not cooperating with law enforcement, that was a value I held before I was a gang member, right? Like it, The gangs didn't convince me that you don't go fuck around and commit crimes and then to save your ass snitch on somebody else, right? That's just kind of that was just the norm, right? So it wasn't just, oh, I'm not following the rules of the politics. I really stepped outside of kind of how I had operated my whole life. Um, and it was what it was, right? But again, in some of those situations, if I had things to do over again, would I do it differently? Sure, I would. But that definitely kind of helped seal the deal, right? You walk into a yard in California and they're like, I've seen this fool on YouTube on a video with this dude. Game over, right? You can't. I got a mouthpiece, man, but you can't talk your way out of that one, right? And but again, I wasn't considering that. That's not where my mind was at the time. Um, so what's another part of YouTube that is problematic in the eyes of some? Some of the stuff I talk about, right? Some of the stuff I talk about. And I've mentioned before, like in some sorts, in terms of like riding off into the sunset, right? Like we need to normalize the reality that some folks do their time, they do their time the right way, they come home and they ride off into the sunset. They just go on and live their life. Doesn't make them some type of degenerate or whatever. They just grew up, they matured, right? Keep in mind that gang activity by definition is very juvenile, right? Like that's what kids do. It's mischievous, adolescent, neighborhood behavior. Um, that that some folks just never grow out of, or don't grow out of for a long time. And I'm not saying that to put anybody down because that's my story as well for a very long time. Uh, I don't. Quick side note is I'm critical of organizations, right? Which is also something that is not looked on kindly by those in the organizations. But again, I don't care. But I'm critical of them. Do I hate everybody who's aligned with them or linked up with them? No, right? I mean, I don't know most, but I do know some people that I really care about, man, and they're decent people. They're caught up in an environment, right? They're incarcerated or whatever, and they're they're playing by the rules that are set out for them. They made their bed and they're lying in it, and I get that, and it's not for me to really judge somebody on that, you know. So I don't hate on affiliates and members and this and that. I also don't admire people because they're affiliates or members either. You know, there's a whole lot of weenies that are clicked up, and there's a whole lot of solid, righteous people that are not, and in between, right? But so it was brought to my attention right in a comment, but it's been said before, like, fool, you didn't just ride off into the sunset. That's what you did originally, right? But coming on YouTube and talking about prison politics is not riding off into the sunset. That's inserting yourself in the conversation. And you're absolutely right. 100%. So why? Why do I do that? Because I could have come on here and told my story, and some other people have started to come online and do that in and very in really cool ways, like respectable ways. I get what they're doing, and and it's dope, right? It's not my lane, um, but I respect it, right? And at when I first came on YouTube, there wasn't a lot of that, right? There wasn't a lot of people kind of towing the line of like I'm just not gonna really speak directly, but you know what time it is and stuff. Um, so why did I go that route, right? Because people in the mix can't talk about the mix, right? And I'm not saying I'm the voice for other people. I It's my own channel. I'm responsible for what I say. I stand on what I say. If I make mistakes, I stand on that as well, right? And I apologize, but I and I alone am responsible for the stuff here, you know. But there are things going on where other folks can't really talk about it because they're in the mix, right? And I get that. There's also folks talking about the mix that are just full of shit. To be honest, there's a lot of people that are just BSing, and they tell these BS stories about these yards that they've been on that was never true, and these how they were committed to this and that, which was never true, and so some of it is just like being honest, right? Just being real, and uh, a lot of the stuff floating around is just bullshit, and so I call it that when I see it. Um, there's also a lot of propaganda, right? And I get it. I was a part of that for a long time. I learned a lot of that. I taught a lot of that. So I understand it, but it's not the reality, you know. So it, you can't be critical if you're in the mix, right? Because there's consequences to that. So that kind of veil of secrecy then allows some of the bullshit to continue because people can't call it bullshit. And or maybe this guy can call it bullshit, but then you can dismiss him because oh that fool fucking testified in a half a dozen cases, right? So what he says doesn't matter, and oh this dude what he says bullshit because he flipped on these dudes over his own reasons, right? And and not saying that uh like I said like I'm better than other people or anything else, but you can say what you want about me, and I'm there's a lot of critique there, right? But I'm not some bitter dude. I'm not a rat. I didn't get burned by the homeboys. I didn't any of that. So those dismissals aren't necessarily as easy, right? And I'm not saying I agree with all these other characters that have their own stuff to say. Again, I just speak for myself. But I I think it's important to know. You know what I mean? I think I don't think prison gangs are good for our communities, and I don't think they're good for our prisons at this point. You know, in 2024, I don't think they're good for the prisons either. You know, and so I'm open about that. I don't wake up and look for ways to embarrass individuals. I don't kind of shield one group and just target the other or whatever. I view them pretty equally. Um, Obviously, my experience is in a particular lane, so that's what I'm more familiar with. But even that doesn't look that familiar anymore. You know, things are different. Uh, but so no, I'm not pretending like I rode off into the sunset, right? And being on YouTube and having these conversations is definitely, you know, kind of the opposite of that. And so I accept the heat that I get from that. I get that there's gonna be people that don't like it. Um, that's okay. I'm all right with that, right? I feel like it's important nonetheless. You know, so I'm obviously gonna keep doing what I'm doing. Right, the channel's not going anywhere. But for all those people that wonder, you know, and ask some variation of these questions, hopefully, um, you know, this gives you a little bit more insight into where I'm coming from. You know, I don't want people to go get caught up, right? That's the work that I did in on a community level. It's not like I was running around the streets telling people war stories from prison. You know, like that wasn't a relevant conversation. Uh, I was teaching skills and helping process the realities of the environment that they're in, and helping provide opportunities for employment in college and travel and you know housing and everything else, right? Um, you know, I was a mentor, right? So that's more what my role was. I wasn't out there talking about prison, but I was dealing with a whole bunch of people that were living in a way that they were destined for prison, and some of them wound up going there, right? And dealing with a whole lot of folks coming out of prison, and some of them wound up going back, and some of them didn't. And so that's still that homie principle, right? Is something that I've held close for a long time, and I'm not saying that this channel lives up to help others move in excellence with every video that comes out, right? But it is kind of where my heart's been at for for a very very long time, and honestly, some of that is born out of my experiences in prison, and some of that is born out of the schooling that I got in prison. I'm not pretending that I'm out here pushing that exact same line, right? But some of the principles, absolutely, I picked up behind the wall, and am applying them now. You know, in some of the stuff that I do, right? And I don't shy away from that. But is it connected to any of that shit? No, absolutely not. So, anyways, like I said, hopefully this helps you guys. You know, for those that have a genuine curiosity or a real interest. Um, and for those that want to talk shit, you know, maybe I gave you a little bit more ammo. Who knows? Just be creative. At least try to make them smile. Help others move with excellence. That's what homies do. Help yourself at the same time because you're worth it. Help your community because they need you. And stay tuned, man. There's gonna be more.